Hello and welcome to Into the Terminal. Today we're going to be talking about lifecycle management, and I have a very special guest with me, Nate.
Good morning, afternoon. I'm losing track of time.
Greetings. We'll get into a little bit of introductions after the transition, but we want to go ahead and jump on into configuring your system's lifecycle management. So, Nate, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing here.
So today we're talking about the different options you've got for, well, basically we're going to talk about how to pin your RHEL box at a certain release. And we'll talk about why you might do that in a bit, but we're going to be talking about lifecycle for extended update support and extended lifecycle support. So go, make with the typies.
Yeah, so we're looking at a RHEL 8 box here. And the first thing we're going to do is just show what we're looking at in terms of repository configuration, right? So this system is configured to some GCP repos because it's a cloud instance. And then it's configured to RHEL 8 AppStream and RHEL 8 base OS. And so, Nate, if I was just to do a DNF update on this box now, it would take me to what release of RHEL?
That would take you to the latest and greatest RHEL that's available from, well, I guess in this case, from the repos that are available on GCP, which should be RHEL 8.6.
Right. So if this is a RHEL 8.2 box or RHEL 8.4 box, if I did a DNF update, it would pull me all the way up to whatever is most recent. So in this case, 8.6.
And not just 8.6, but the latest and greatest on 8.6. Not even a certain revision of 8.6, right? So if last night some patches came out, you'd get them.
Exactly. And so for a lot of people, that's not their desired state. They want to be very controlled in what updates they apply. And so Red Hat offers this thing called extended update support. And we're just going to go ahead and subscribe the box of that. And we'll talk after the transition on why that would be interesting. So we have the extended update support entitlements already added to this machine. And if we do a subscription manager repos dash list, and I'm just going to grep for EUS. Oops, helps me grep for EUS. We'll see that there's a bunch in here that are applicable, but there's two that we're specifically interested in for this machine. All right, so there's a bunch of EUS related ones, but I think the ones that we're specifically interested in are this one, which is the application stream repository, and I almost saw it.
It's the right word, the wrong repo.
There it is.
There you go.
Base OS one, right? Because that'll replace the base OS and the application stream repos currently enabled on this machine.
And for anyone who's not familiar, those are the two core repositories you need to make a RHEL box work, a RHEL 8 box. RHEL 9 too, I guess, right? Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So if I want to make this this change, can you help me out with some command line goodness, Nate?
Sure thing. So what you're going to need to do is, first of all, you're going to have to disable the production repos, right? So you want to take subscription manager. Repos is the subcommand, right? That lets you work with repositories, and then dash disable and the name of each repository. In fact, you do disable twice, one for each repo. And this will turn both of them off in one command.
All right. And so at the opening of our episode, we did a DNF repo list. And so now that we've disabled these repos, if we do another DNF repo list,
should show you nothing.
Just the Google,
right? Except for the Google ones, right? So yeah, it's. I guess it's important to note here, right? This is only the RHEL repos. Any other external repos won't be touched.
Yeah, and if I did a DNF update now, it wouldn't be very successful because I no longer get any RHEL content. So
right.
You would right there now.
You would just get updates from the Google Compute stuff you're still subscribed to.
Right. All right. So I need to swap out uh, the repos that are the most updated RHEL 8 for those that are tied to a specific release number. So we've
Yep.
disabled the most updated. So how do we enable um, the other ones?
So there's two things you need to do. First is we have to turn on the extended update support repositories, and those are very similar commands. You just swap out disable for enable and swap out the repository names for the EUS repo names.
And these are the ones that we saw in our subscription manager repo list, right?
Yep.
Oops. Hold a little bit too much on that copy paste. Oh, I
What did I
forgot
do
repos.
wrong? You forgot the word repos.
Yeah.
Now, you guys will notice while Scott's going back here to add the word repos that we did not yet specify the actual version of RHEL that we want to be pinned to. Now, you could take it to chance, and what will happen is your RHEL box, if it's already at, say, 8.4, should assume you're at 8.4, and it might work just fine, but usually sysadmins don't like to take chances. So the way to tell it, I want this specific release of RHEL, is you run another subscription manager command, subscription manager release dash dash set, and then the version you want to lock to.
And I failed all the copy paste on that one, Nate, because I used
Oh, see, I'm getting
SOS
ahead of you.
times.
Oh, you put the oops.
We're professionals here at End of the Terminal.
We are.
All right, but you'll notice that for each one, after I enable it, right, I'm going into DNF and just looking at the repository list and making sure that it looks the way I expect it to look, right? So now we turned off the most updated relates. We turned on the extended update support for
Hmm.
RHEL 8. And what was the last thing we need to do, Nate?
We want to do subscription manager release space dash dash set 8.4, or really whatever version you're looking for. In this case, we're doing 8.4.
Yeah. All right. And so now we're done. Got the right repos, we've got ourselves set to a specific release. And now if I do like a DNF update, what kind of updates do I get now on this system?
So what you should get, so there's a key to mention here that we didn't really go into, is if the release you were already on was newer than the version you set to, it's not going to downgrade you or anything, because that would be bad usually. But assuming that you were already on an 8.3 or 8.4 or older machine, what you would get is all the latest updates up to 8.4. And I don't mean release day 8.4, I mean 8.4 plus any updates that came in the stream of 8.4 until 8.5 was released, plus any critical, what is it, critical and moderate vulnerabilities that are patched since 8.4 was no longer the current release will then be backported to 8.4 EUS. That's the power of EUS.
And it's critical and important.
Critical and important. Sorry about that. I should have taken notes.
All right. So why don't we transition to the second part of the show? We'll go into a little more depth on like why someone would be interested in doing this and some of the resources that Red Hat provides to help us out. All right. So just as a reminder to our viewers, the second part of the show, we go a little bit more in depth, is where we engage with folks in chat and answer questions. And oh, don't forget to like and share or subscribe to our channel if you're interested in seeing more of this. All right. So talking about why someone would want to use something like EUS, or actually, why don't we even roll back a little bit further and just talk about like general life cycle things?
Sure thing. So, life cycle in general can be tricky, and there's lots of ways to manage life cycle. We're going to go into basically what's available with a RHEL subscription, as long as you've got a subscription that provides extended update support, which is EUS, and possibly extended lifecycle support, which is ELS. And then there's this other release called E4S, which is more for SAP support, right? But they're all very similar, and I'll explain why in a second. What these do is they're special repositories that allow you to either continue running a RHEL system that is past the end of its life cycle. That's what extended life cycle support is. Extended update support is what we just showed you, where you need to pin at a specific release of RHEL. In our example, it was 8.4. And why you would do that, we'll talk about that in a second. And E4S is essentially the same thing, except it has a slightly longer period where it's going to be supported. And that's specific to vendors like SAP that like to version lock for longer periods of time, right? So, in a nutshell, that's what extended update, extended lifecycle, and E4S are all about.
And so I just pulled up the RHEL 8, actually the RHEL Lifecycle page, which includes this RHEL 8 graphic. And if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see the RHEL 9 graphic too. And essentially what we're looking at is like every 6 months, Red Hat releases a new RHEL something, right? So the most recent was last November. We released last,
Hey, it should have been.
that's for me,
Yeah.
Corona World. Uh, in the spring, we released 9.0 and 8.6.
Right.
Uh, and so in the fall this year, or I guess November-ish, we should expect 8.7 and 9.1. And
Right.
then in the spring the next year, we should expect 8.8 and 9.2. And then we should expect in another 6 months, roughly 9.3 and 8.9. And you can see
So,
from this graphic that we have like kind of the when you should expect things, right, based off of the calendar year. And then some of these have that like longer line.
yep.
And the longer line is the extended updates that Nate was just talking about. So there's two different extended update packages. One is extended update support, which is 2 year, and that's what that light blue extension is. And then Nate was mentioning the E4S, which is the 4 year update support for SAP. When you buy RHEL for SAP solutions, and I don't want to get into like all the salesy things, but like, so that green line is that additional 2 year extension for that product. And if you're in that extension, you get critical and important security updates only. So in our example, we pinned ourselves to 8.4, and you can see the 8.4 has the blue line. That's what we subscribed ourselves to when we did the repo enable for the EUS repos. And we only have the light blue line. We don't have E4S on that box.
Right.
So for the next like what year-ish,
Yeah.
we'll continue to get critical and important security RADA. And then once that year runs out, we don't get any more updates anymore, which is not great.
Right. So I guess it might be important to mention that the normal life cycle of a RHEL release, when you get to the next release of RHEL, so when 8.5 became 8.6, without EUS or E4S, your 8.5 box, if you're pinned at 8.5, will stop receiving updates. It won't get anything new because you'll be expected to have moved to 8.6, right? So if you've somehow locked it to 8.5, you won't get any more updates. Not only will you not be under support, you'll also won't be getting updates, which is really what support gets you, right? So in case that wasn't clear, why do I care about extending that? It's because you won't be getting anything, right? Not anything. You won't be getting updates.
Right. And like we update security vulnerabilities all the time. There's a
Yes.
whole bunch of security standards like PCI or HIPAA or even criteria for things like Sarbanes-Oxley compliance or STIGs or CIS that say within a certain period, you're going to apply all of the security updates that have been released by your vendor. Well, if you've version locked yourself on something using something crazy like a DNF version lock, you'll stop getting any updates because we're now no longer producing updates for that dot release. And so while we fixed the security issue and we've published the package, your box won't show it as an available package because it's not published in the repositories to which you have subscribed yourself. So this is where EUS is handy. It gives you that longer term supportability of a specific dot release, still gives you all the critical and important security ROTA put into that dot release's maintenance. And then once you run out of that 2-year period, now you have to upgrade to another dot release, right? So if we are pinned on 8.4 like we are today, then at the end of next year when my EUS runs out, I might consider updating to 8.6 or maybe 8.8.
Yep.
And then I can lock myself again to that dot release and get the EUS extension for whatever I've locked myself to.
Sorry, I'm just looking at chat here.
I
All
saw
right.
the commentary.
Yeah,
Can we
yeah.
address
So I guess, well, there was a quick question here about the status of SC Linux on RHEL 9, which isn't quite related to the subject at hand, but it should be a relatively quick answer. SC Linux is by default set to enforcing in both RHEL 8 and 9. But the big change, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Scott, the big change on RHEL 9 is that it's no longer, the option to disable it is no longer there. You can still set it to permissive. You can have permissive or enforcing. So if you, for some reason, need it off or you want to turn it off for testing, you can still set it to permissive, which means it'll log everything but not block anything. Hope that answers that question.
Correct. And you're right. The option to completely disable it entirely is what has changed in RHEL 9.
Right.
But if you're happily using targeted policy and enforcing mode on RHEL 8, you will happily use targeted policy and enforcing mode on RHEL 9 and shouldn't really see a difference.
Right. Right. All right. So I guess we sort of touched on why people would care about whether they can use EUS, E4S, or not. The general recommendation I'll usually give people is that unless they have a very compelling reason to pin to a specific release of RHEL, they shouldn't pin to a specific release of RHEL. They should stay up to date based on whatever their particular patch cycle is. There's ways to manage it that don't require EUS and E4S. However, some places need long-term stability on a specific release because that release has gone through security audits or whatever, right? And that's what these are really here to help you do, right? So
Right. And then the other thing to think about with lifecycle planning specifically, right? Back in the annals of history of RHEL, there was no ability for us as consumers of RHEL to know when a new RHEL release was coming. Like there
mhm,
were some guidelines, like we tried to do it every 3 or 4 years for a major, and we tried to do it every year for a minor update. But there were factors that would cause that to change, delay, or slip. And we didn't provide any guidance to consumers of RHEL that that was happening or when they could expect things. And with RHEL 8, we said enough. So for RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, we now have this published lifecycle cadence. So we're telling you, you should expect a major release every 3 years. And we saw that happen with RHEL 9 recently, right? 3 years from when RHEL 8 was released, RHEL 9 was released. The other thing is every 6 months, we have a minor dot release. And that holds true for RHEL 9 as well. If I scroll down a little bit on this page, you'll see the published RHEL 9 planning guide.
mhm,
So here's what's going to happen. No mystery. And in 3 years from spring 2022, so in 2025, spring, mid-year, somewhere around there, we should expect RHEL 10, right? That's the 3-year cadence.
right,
And why this is important is if you are figuring out how to do maintenance, right? When do you know when to plan for additional tasks for doing an in-place upgrade or for migrating your data from one RHEL to another RHEL? Or maybe you need to budget for additional developer resources to do QA and testing and updates for an application because you need to move it to a newer RHEL. Well, here you go. Here's the schedule. So
Yeah, a predictable life cycle or predictable release cycle is something that RHEL, well, admittedly, RHEL lacked for a long time, and we fixed that with 8, and I'm very glad we did. I was still a customer when 8 came out, and I was happy for it because now all of a sudden it is predictable. It wasn't just, oh crap, a new release came out, time to start planning, right? So
right.
good stuff.
So I just turned on the caption for this page. This RHEL Lifecycle page gives you all the things, and includes a bit on extended update support and what that is. It is sometimes an add-on, sometimes included with subscriptions. It depends on what you've purchased and how. And again, I don't want to like jump into all the how you buy things and pay for stuff and packaging and whatnot. But extended update support is out there for those of you that 6 months is too fast. You need to slow it down some. And here's the schedule for when it happens and when it runs out, and you can integrate that into all of your application planning.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that several subscriptions include it, but some do not. So you're going to want to check. You may already have it and not know it, or maybe you don't. But that's an account team thing. You're going to have to check with your team.
And then Nate, you found this great article on describing what EUS is, and um, over on the customer portal as well. So I wanted to share that too.
Yep. Yeah, there's instructions there about how to do what we just did on stream here, how to enable it, and it gives you a whole bunch of background and detail as to what these things are and what they're for.
All right. So we talked about DNF version lock. Don't do it. It's horrible. Like you make Scott McBride cry when you do that.
Yeah, there I could imagine there's use cases, otherwise the option wouldn't exist. But yeah, generally you don't want to do that.
Uh, and then the other life cycle thing that we have is called ELS. And Nate, you mentioned this earlier in the show. What is ELS?
So ELS is similar from a technology perspective, as in it is a separate repository that you can subscribe a RHEL system to, that gets you extended updates for a particular release of RHEL. Except in this case, it's the last release of the last version of RHEL. So in this case, I guess RHEL 7 is not there yet, but RHEL 6 is. Extended lifecycle support is the release of RHEL has reached the end of its life cycle, right? So RHEL 6.10, I think, is the last release of RHEL 6. It is now considered end of support for anyone who has not purchased an extension to that, which is what extended lifecycle support is. And that gives you, I believe it's 2 additional years to get off of that particular release of RHEL. But similar to extended update support, you'll get those high or those critical and important security patches back to RHEL 6. You will not get new features. You won't get a kernel update. You won't get the latest NVIDIA driver or whatever, right? You'll get critical things patched backward to make your system secure. So that's good for anyone who has that aging RHEL fleet that they just couldn't get buy-in from the application owners to get to RHEL 7, right? That never happens, does it?
And we've had on a few of our different RHEL shows, our general manager, Gunnar Hellickson, come on and talk about like RHEL and the future of RHEL. Um, he has said that every ELS, right, extended lifecycle support add-on, every dollar we take for that is a dollar we don't want.
Right.
We don't want customers buying the ELS subscription, not because it's not worthwhile, but more that means that they're in this like 2-year countdown where they have to get off that RHEL version or we stop providing them updates. Right.
Right.
So ELS is provided as an extension beyond the 10-year normal maintenance lifecycle of RHEL. It is an extra cost, and we really don't want to take your money for that. We want you to like stay within that 5 years, and I think the scheduled lifecycle plan that we showed earlier like that helps a lot in knowing when these release dates are coming, when the end of normal maintenance support is coming, so that you can make a plan and move your fleet along to newer versions of RHEL as needed. Because we don't want you in that situation like RHEL 6 is currently, where if you have RHEL 6 boxes, if you haven't purchased ELS entitlements, you're no longer getting updates for them. If you have purchased ELS entitlements, you're getting critical and important security errata only. And when ELS runs out in another, I don't know, year and a few months, you won't be getting that anymore either. So now's the time. If you're on RHEL 6, it's important now to start moving those apps to newer versions of RHEL. If you're on RHEL 7 is in maintenance phase 2. So it's not yet outside the 10-year lifespan, but we only have about 18 months left on it. So now's the time to start making a plan for getting off of it so that you don't have to pick up those extended life cycle support add-ons or extended life phase add-ons for RHEL 7. All right, I
Right.
see
And
that chatter
it's
in the chat.
it's important to remember, folks, that even though these older releases are still under support because you've purchased an extension, it's still a 10-year-old kernel. I mean, in the case of RHEL 6, it's like an 11-year-old kernel now, right? So yes, we're backporting security fixes, but only the higher end ones, right? Those medium grade security problems, they still might exist on your RHEL 6 boxes. So you want to get them retired.
Yep. All right, so I see a couple of questions here. One is Steve Cassidy asks, with regard to Red Hat certifications, is there a timetable of when these will be retired, as they tend to match RHEL versions? So yes, I believe it is 1 year after the release of a major RHEL release. So RHEL 9 came out in the spring, and so spring next year is when you will no longer be able to take RHEL 8 versioned certification exams for RHCSA and RHCE. They have already started moving away the classrooms. So if you like show up to somewhere to take a test in person with a instructor, or you show up for a training class with an instructor, that's already RHEL 9 based. You can purchase RHEL 8 based exams for either remote exam sessions where you do it at your home or your office with your own equipment, or the what we call kiosk exams, where you can like show up to just take an exam on a piece of equipment that Red Hat has scattered around the world. And those will stop being available. RHEL 8 versions of those will stop being available next spring. All right. Also, Shantanu asks, does the 2 higher major version build guarantee still exist? So if an application is built on RHEL 7, will it work on RHEL 9? And Tony chimes in and says, I think you're referring to the ABI guarantee. So we do support across version this ABI standard, right? So there's a protected list of calls for the kernel that is maintained across versions. That list is very small. So, and it applies to like, I don't remember if it applies to majors or not. I think it applies to minor releases. I'll have to find some documentation for that. But the bigger question of like, does an app I wrote on RHEL 7 work on RHEL 9? I don't
Yeah,
know.
there's a lot of dependencies there. Does your app need Python 2? Right? Like that's a perfect example. Python 2 isn't I think it's not supported at all on RHEL 9 right now. I think you can probably pull it in, but it's not there by default.
So Shantanu clarifies a little bit, talking about compat-libs. So yes, the compatibility libraries are still there, but if it's a compiled binary, maybe the compiled binary would work on the later version. I'm not willing to say yes. We're in maybe territory.
Yeah.
If it is a, you know, Python PHP, Perl. Um, again, the answer
Did
is
that hurt?
it did. I actually really like everyone else like shuns me for saying such things.
It was my
Uh,
first language. There's a special place in my heart for Perl.
so again, the answer is maybe. It really depends on what library calls and what additional modules are used in those applications, because a lot of those programming libraries don't maintain backward compatibility. So in many times I've seen where a PHP app written on 2 versions ago RHEL, when you just plop that thing down on new RHEL, it does not execute, and it actually needs some fixing up by the developers to make sure that they obsolete libraries, or maybe they make some changes to some of the way that they wrote some of their methods so that it uses a more modern call of that framework. All right. So there is no like no it won't work or yes it will work for
Yeah.
both of them. You could say maybe you should try it. Um,
I can say that there is a subset of the old compatibility libs that were deprecated on RHEL 8, the compat lib stdc++. So if those are the ones you're talking about, you may be out of luck. Because I think on RHEL 8 they went away.
all right. So I had promised that we were going to do introductions, and then I promptly ignored that.
And we didn't.
But here at the end, because we're about to wrap up. So you guys may have seen Nate on some other programs too. So Nate, do you have some news to share with folks about who you are and why you're here now?
Sure. So until 2 weeks from now, anyway, I'm a TAM here at Red Hat, but I'm moving into Scott's team, right? So that's I guess that's the news you're alluding to there, right? I'm going to be a technical marketing manager. You're probably going to see more of me, maybe on this show, maybe on RHEL Presents. It all depends on how things shuffle and who's on vacation at any given moment. So so that's
Wait,
me.
why Eric's not here? Because he's out
Yeah,
doing fun things, not real
yeah,
pretends.
yeah. So
All right,
all right.
welcome, Nate. And I don't see any additional questions other than Shantanu saying Pearl is awesome. I appreciate that. Now I feel less shunned. Um, so we'll wrap up today's show. Next week is going to be on GNU Privacy Guard, or GPG. So we're going to do a little bit of data encryption and shuttling it around between users and unencrypting it. So we will cover that on next week's Into the Terminal episode, GPG.
Encrypt all the things.
All right, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Have a
Take
good
care.
one, everybody.